One of the things you mentioned in the book that really grabbed my attention was this idea of storytelling and in particular, like, storytelling, not just, like, as a communication skill, but I think you view it as something central to leadership and organizational alignment, and so I'd love to just hear more of your thoughts on that, and what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, I think that telling stories is kind of fundamental to the human experience. And we tell
Mm,
ourselves stories all the time, our lives in some sense, as we say, well, who are we or what have we been doing? All of that is, in the end, an exercise in storytelling. It contextualizes, who we are and what we're doing. And it applies certainly in a business environment as well, where you know, you're trying to figure out what the company is doing and why it's doing it and what the aspirations are and what the goals are.
yeah,
Well, all of that is in the end storytelling. I'm not
mhm,
saying storytelling in a fictional sense. I mean, ideally, it's not fictional, especially in a business context. But nonetheless, it's explaining to people in a way that is hopefully understandable and coherent and ideally compelling what it is you're trying to do or what's going on or what the problem is, even the story around the problem. It makes sense of things that otherwise may be hard for people to understand or at least achieve some alignment around understanding. And then fundamentally, as a leader, if you want to convince anybody to do anything, stories are enormously valuable in explaining, what you're trying to do. So
mm,
so yeah, I think of, I mean, even this discussion we're having right now. I mean,
mhm,
all of this is around storytelling.
mhm.
It's what have we experienced and why, and why do we have a certain point of view, and how is that formed, and how does that get applied? Explaining all of that in the end is a kind of broad view of stories, I think, and storytelling, and I think it's important.
You how might you I mean, that really resonates, and I'm curious. When we work with a number of leaders, and I think this is probably a prevailing, like, thought, regardless of who we've worked with or not, just that sometimes leaders, have a lot of anxiety about, like, leading an organization through a significant change, and I'm curious, like, the role, in your experience and things that you've been through of effective storytelling can help to bring people into, the change and maybe not only feel less anxiety, but just have more belief in it.
I think that when you're leading a group, it's important that the group have a shared understanding of what's happening and why things are being done. And I
Mhm,
think that sort of anxiety apart, I think it's just figuring out how do you get everybody sailing in the same direction. It depends on that sort of, shared understanding and telling stories, explaining to folks, you kind of here's the situation, here's the story of the company effectively
mm,
is it's important in getting everybody moving in the same direction. But I do think that to the extent you can explain that in a way that makes sense to folks, it is reassuring. And that reassurance helps to reduce the amount of stress that people may be feeling because often the outcome is uncertain. Again, it's you're dealing with problems. The problems might have significant implications. If you get stuck worrying too much about what the implications are, it can be fairly destructive and can, affect people in a very negative way. So focusing on what the situation is and what you're going to do about it, I think can be very helpful in focusing the group on being constructive and you know devoted to what they can control as opposed to what's out of their control.
yeah. Mike